Dan with us this week. And Dan, would you like to introduce yourself and what book you write for Valiant?
Of course, yes. My name's Dan Abnett, and I'm writing Rye for Valiant at the moment. Just before that, I wrote Fallen World, which set Rye up. Yes, and writing that and enjoying it very much indeed.
That's awesome. And also for everyone that's in the comments, we are open for questions as well as this show goes on. So definitely get your questions going. But for people who don't know what the book's about, can you give us a little info? And I guess to give information, August, if you haven't read it at all, there's a trade coming out. So issues 1 through 5. Am I correct for the trade?
That's correct. Yes. Yeah. With the book had got 5 issues out when the COVID-19 hit, so went on hiatus. So delighted that in August we are coming back with issue 6, which is the start of a new arc, and at the same time doing the trade of the first 5 issues. So they're both available to pre-order now, and I think everybody should be supporting their comic shops, and that's a great way of doing it. So it's a great jumping on point and a great way of catching up. But Rye, you said the character is very interesting. Rye's been around in the Valiant universe for some considerable time. In fact, there's a great run prior to mine that I read with great enthusiasm when I was getting ready to write this. But the interesting thing about Rye is he's set in the future of the Valiant universe. We're sort of the year 4002. So whereas everything else in the Valiant continuity is as it were present day, his book is set in the future, and he is a partly human, partly synthetic warrior created to protect an orbital city called New Japan. And he's this extraordinarily precise, superhuman warrior, very noble, very wise, very honest. And in the stories leading up to this book, he has realized that Father, who is the artificial intelligence that runs New Japan and looks after everybody, and indeed created Rye, is essentially a despotic, tyrannical AI. So Rye has defeated Father and literally, and this was what happened in Fallen World, which is the event that happens before the series, brought New Japan crashing down to Earth, where all the citizens have now got to build new lives on this strange Earth that's sort of been left to run wild for the last 1,000 or more years. But Rye's book itself is incredibly simple in premise. It is Rye setting out on a quest through this strange world to find the offspring, and the offspring are essentially backup programs of Father. If enough of them recombine, Father will come back, and Rye is determined not to let Father return. So he's got to find these things and eliminate them for the good of the world, for the good of the human race, for the good of everybody. And that is his quest. And so we have the book is a real quest book. It's him accompanied by Raijin, who is a previous prototype version of the same series that Rye is. So he's essentially his brother, but Raijin is sort of as a young teenage boy, even though he's his older brother. So the two of them are traveling together to find the offspring and to, in doing so, explore the strange world of 4002 Valiant universe.
And for people who have never read the character, why do you think they should be interested in this book? Why do you think in August they should go pick up that trade?
Well, for a start, I hope we're telling a really good story. I think he's a pretty compelling character. To me, one of the key reasons for picking up this series and this trade, in all honesty, I think I've done a good job with the story, but the art is magnificent. It's absolutely extraordinary art. So it's worth buying for that alone. Incredible detail, incredible storytelling and choreography in the battles and visualization of this world. But in terms of, as it were, selling this book to you in terms of why you should read it, if you like superheroes with a touch of SF, which is my kind of thing, sort of cosmic science fiction stuff, this has got loads of that. The future Valiant universe was a sort of a blank slate. And one of the things that Lisa, the editor, asked me to do was to, as quickly as possible, establish how amazing and varied this world was. So the first few issues of that 5 that's in the first trade sort of standalone episodes where he encounters completely different things, and we wanted to show how varied and how extraordinary this world was. So it's I suppose a very simple story that's still full of very, very big ideas, very strange science fiction concepts, some really sort of striking visuals. So I think that's why it's the sort of, they asked me to do it, and when they asked me to do it, I got excited immediately because it's exactly the sort of thing I'd want to read. So that is why I think people should pick it up.
Now, with COVID and us getting into issue 6 and all that, did that affect your writing of this series? Did you have to stop writing this series for a while, or did it affect anything?
It did a little. Everything paused. There was a hiatus where we sort of all down tools anyway. The interesting thing about working for Valiant, which I particularly love, compared to the other company, I've worked for most of the companies. DC, I'm working for DC at the moment as well on Justice League Odyssey, work for Marvel, everything like that. Valiant is singular because it runs quite a long way in advance of its publication date. A lot of companies end up running close to the wire on a monthly deadline to get the book turned in. But with Rye, we'd been working on it for quite a few months before we even started publishing it. So we had a lot of issues in the drawer. So although there was still work to be done when we down tools, I think we had lots. So the issues that we are waiting to publish now, 6 or 7 onwards, they have been finished and polished for quite some time, waiting to go. So it's nice to have that reserve. It's not like we were sort of spending months sitting around going, I don't know what we're going to do, and then when we finally get the order to restart, it's a mad rush to get it back onto schedule.
And do you want this to be it is an ongoing series, but how long would you want this series to go for? Because I feel like with Valiant, it's so much with their mini series and each volume, building on each other. How long do you want this to go for?
I'd love it to go for as long as possible because there is enormous potential in this world and these stories, and we're getting an awful lot of great critical notices and great response from the readers, which is reassuring. What I think is probably the best way of doing it, given the way the comic market works in this day and age, is if we produce it almost as seasons. Sort of rather than an ongoing, where the sales can tail off at a certain point, we simply present it in one ongoing story delivered in sort of chapters in the same way that a TV show would work. And I think that's a model that's working for a lot of people. So, but I'm hoping that we have a big following who are sitting out there desperate for us to come back. And I hope that conversations like the one we're having today will encourage other people to go and order it, buy it, and get into it. Because as I say, I think there's a lot to enjoy about it from the art onwards.
Well, I'm sure people will run to the store and get this. And now moving into, again, talking about the fans that are already vested, what can we expect from the second arc? What can we expect from issue 6?
Well, the quest is ongoing. And as I said just now, one of the things that I wanted to do with the first few issues in the first 5 was to start to establish as quickly as possible the range and interest of this future world that we've never seen before. So there are themes there that I'm going to be picking up on. But one of the key things I wanted to do, and it's something I as a reader always take delight in, is the idea that when you see the futuristic version of an established universe like the Valiant universe, you can see clues in it, sort of elements in it that connect back to the universe that you know. So we have featured a couple of characters so far who are more famous for being in the contemporary Valiant universe, and that's something I want to do some more of. I don't want to overpopulate it with references, but I want those references to be there. So readers will know that the Bloodshot, or at least a version of Bloodshot, has shown up in this story so far. The Eternal Warrior also, and the Geomancer have shown up. And from 6 onwards, I've got 2 other big connections to the present-day Valiant universe that I'm waiting to reveal. One of which is a development of things that I've shown before. And one of which I think will, even though I'm saying, hey, there's a surprise, I think it will come as a real surprise in the way that it's delivered. I think people will be genuinely taken aback by exactly what it is and how I've integrated it into the story. So there's that, but also lots of imagination, lots of the things that we've been doing in the first 5. So weird combinations of things. We've had sort of post-apocalypse. We've had cybernetic dinosaurs. We've had issue 2 was this strange story set in this sort of perfect smart home that had survived for thousands of years and was automatically running to look after its inhabitants who had never arrived to live in it. So there's tonally there's a big range. There's big action, but there's also smaller, quieter stories, and then the strange juxtaposition of weird things. New Japan was a place where almost anything was possible thanks to positronic technology. So because a lot of that is now down on the surface of the world, again, almost anything is possible. You could be walking along one day, riding your Triceratops like you do, and a biplane could fly past, and then you could meet some Greek hoplites, and then whatever. So there's all sorts of weird things there. I will say that from issue 6 onwards, things get a bit spooky. We sort of enter into having done sort of big action and post-apocalypse stuff. We're sort of going into realms of much more sort of creepy, almost horror. There is a sort of supernatural air to it, a sort of a darkness, which I think is really nice, just because it was a different way to go, and it suits the story we're telling.
Now, you're speaking on working on Fallen World and then going into this series. How do you feel like you make each volume different? And obviously, you've worked on Valiant titles before. How do you want to bring your own breath of fresh air with each title?
I don't know. I think I deploy what skills I have in the way that I always do, which is I sort of look at the project, work out what sort of stories I think would be really interesting to tell, the sort of stories that would appeal to me. They say you shouldn't write for yourself, but in some respects, I always judge myself as a sort of first reader. If it's something that excites me, I figure it may excite other people, and also I will be excited writing it, which hopefully will translate into the reading experience. But it's also a matter of making sure you've got it right, I suppose. I'm quite happy to do research in terms of reading back on a character's history and making sure that I've got the details right, the continuity right, and stuff like that. So it was just working on this book was a little odd, in as much as Lisa asked me to write Rye. She came to me and said, are you interested in doing this book? And clearly she knew me well enough to know that it was exactly the sort of book, that combination of superheroics and science fiction, that suited me and suited the sort of things I like to write about. And it was only once we got going and I was basing it on this Fallen World event that I knew was taking place before, and I'd been given an outline of what was going to happen, that Lisa said to me, actually, do you want to write Fallen World as well and build your own foundation? So I actually went backwards and wrote this book that set up the book that I was going on to write. And they both had immediately very different feels. Like I said, Rye is this sort of lone warrior with his companion. It's a quest story. It's, comparatively speaking, small scale and narrow in its focus. Fallen World was a big event with a multiple cast of characters and multiple storylines going on simultaneously. So those tonal things came sort of set themselves up to begin with. That's why there was a big difference there. But no, I wouldn't write Rye the way that I would write, I don't know, Justice League or Guardians of the Galaxy or something like that. You bring to it the tone and the basics of what that book should have and what fans of that book like.
Now, we do have some great comments here. Valiant Comics are in the chat. We got Danny who's in the chat. And Super Mario, I don't know how much you can answer this, but I'll ask the question. If there was a Faith TV show, who would play her? Who would you like to see play Faith?
Oh, my goodness me. I don't think I can answer that. I think I think more than anything else, it's about personality, and that would be really the job of the casting director to get it absolutely right. I think somebody who evokes the right personality is the best way of doing it. I'm sorry I can't be more useful than that, but sometimes in my head I do cast characters, both in comics and when I'm writing novels. I sort of mentally cast people, so I've got a handle on who they are. But there are other people other characters who absolutely I don't fix them on one particular person. So it's weird. I do that, but not all the time.
Now, speaking of, would you like to see Rye get a movie treatment like Bloodshot? Would you like to see a TV show? What do you think Rye fits in other media, or would you not want to see that at all?
I think it would make a great movie, to be honest. I think it's very cinematic. I think if you looked at Juan José's art in the series and the sort of things we're visualizing, it would be a great movie because of its quest structure, its episodic structure. Actually, what I think it would make is a terrific sort of Netflix series where you have individual episodes that are linked together by a meta story. I think that would give it the elbow room. I love the fact that that television, streaming television these days, seems to be really finding its stride in terms of delivering proper long form stories. I certainly grew up in an age where the movie was the big brother of television, and that if you were going to adapt a book or something, you made a movie of it. And actually what we're discovering now is that television has got the real estate, the space to do the sort of scale of a novel in televisual form. And I think, just incidentally, I think that's one of the reasons the Marvel Universe movies worked so well, is because they linked them together, and what you essentially got was the most extraordinary miniseries across multiple movies. I think long form, serial long form, really appeals to people, and I think streaming TV is a very good way of delivering that, because otherwise there is a danger that you truncate a story in an effort to get it even into a sort of 2.5 hour movie. You're kind of squashing something in there. So yeah, no, I'd love to see that. It'd be fantastic.
I agree. I think comics in general fit so well for TV just because they're both serialized mediums. I mean, not that, like we were saying, not to go against the Marvel movies and all that, because they have their own space in film. But yeah, I think to tell like a true comic story, I think TV is the best place to do that.
I agree, and I think maybe that the lack of success that other people have had with cinematic movies of superheroes is exactly due to that. It's due to that sort of the idea that you've got to compress it into a 2-hour bite, and as I say, that I think that's one of the reasons that Marvel, whether you like Marvel or not, but that's one of the reasons they've been so successful, is because they've essentially made a 44-hour long movie in 21 installments or whatever. And I think that's very clever, because it's recognizing that cinema is a great place to go to, but actually can cinema mimic the long form advantages of television? And in their case, they certainly did.
Yeah, like what would the Marvel Universe look like if it was just Iron Man? It would look very different.
It would.
For sure. And we got some questions here in the comments. Greg, who's from Valiant, says, if you would have a Rye crossover with another character you've written, who would it be with?
Oh, goodness. I presume Greg is referring to characters I've written all over the place in terms of sort of cross-company things, because the one character I want to do, actually the two Valiant characters I wanted to cross over were Bloodshot and Eternal Warrior, and those two things have happened, although I'm not to say that they won't happen some more. I'd love to put the War Mother in this story, and there are certain other characters that exist in contemporary Valiant that I'd love to do sort of futuristic versions of, so maybe we'll see some of that. But more broadly than that, I'd love to, I don't know who I'd love to sort of pit Rye against any of the great sort of cosmic characters from some of the other established universes, and I speak as somebody who's worked in those areas a lot. But characters like Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, or possibly even Deathlock, would be an interesting contrast. And over at DC, where the Justice League Odyssey, which is the cosmic team there, or Green Lantern, or somebody like that. I think that mix of superheroes with SF works extremely well, and I think of Rye as a hero. I don't necessarily think of him as a superhero, except in the fact that he is a superpowered person. To me, he is a hero in an SF setting who happens to be able to do things that a normal human can't be. He's not a costume superhero in that regard. So yeah, there's a huge potential there. Huge potential. I want to see.
Oh, for sure. I would love to see that. And we talked about obviously Valiant characters in Rye's timeline. Would you like to see Rye go into the contemporary timeline, and how do you think that would look like?
I think that would be. I think first of all, I think that would be possible. Some of the things I love about the Valiant universe. One of them is that there are really good rules for the way things work, and one of those rules covers time travel. Other universes tend to bend and play fast and loose with these rules quite a lot, but Valiant is pretty good at overseeing a consistency with their sort of the rules of their universe. Having said that, it would not be impossible to transfer Rai to the present day, if only briefly. And I think that would be a fascinating thing to see. I would love to see him meet the present day incarnations of Bloodshot or Exo or Ninjak. There's so many things there that it would be fantastic to see. And I think it would be. I think you've given me a great idea there, because I think that would be a very interesting thing to see. That they sometimes you learn more about a place you know quite well. In this case, the present day Valiant universe, readers know it quite well. But I think you learn more about it if you see it through the eyes of somebody who is seeing it for the first time. And to Rai, it would be a fascinating place that he's completely unfamiliar with, because it's nothing like the technological future that he comes from. But also it would be full of things that he recognizes, because he can see the roots of the technological future that he's going to come from already growing there. And I think that would be really interesting. I think there would be a sort of it would kind of almost have that in some respects that charm, that fish out of water charm you get with, oh God, dare I say, Beverly Hills Cop or Crocodile Dundee, you know, where somebody from somewhere else turns up in the middle of something and they're so out of place it works really, really well. So yeah, that would be great. That'd be great. I'm going to make a note of that.
I hope we get to see it for sure. We've gotten this question a lot from two people now. Nicholas, he said, who wins? Is it Rai between Rai versus Ninjak? Who do you think will win? Nope, you can't be biased.
I can't be biased. I think that's one of those ones where we need to be fairly definitive about this. Rai would win that. Rai is stupendously able. We're not just talking about someone who is very highly trained or with certain superpowers. I know Ninjak is incredibly capable and talented, and if you were writing that story, you would want to put it into a context where there was an extraordinary balance between the two of them, and you know, in the same way that you know, sort of, you moderate a story where Batman fights Superman, even though one outclasses one in some respects, but they've got to have advantages both, because they're both sort of world-beating heroes. So Ninjak versus Rai will be a very interesting contest, but Rai is transhuman. I mean, he is a post-human being, and I think ultimately he would just be able to withstand more damage and move more rapidly and with greater precision. That's what he was built for. He's literally engineered to do that. So my money would be on Rai in that. But the story I wrote where that happened would be more interesting than that.
Well, another one I hope we get to see on the page one of these days. We do have a question from Super Mario again. Is it better to be on a lesser known, I guess he means like indie book, because you have less restrictions compared to Marvel or DC?
They both yes and no, really. I love having creative freedom. So whether it's on an indie book or indeed even something like Rai itself, which because it's set in the future has enormous world building potential in it. It's not restricted. I love being able to do that, because you sort of get to use vast amounts of your imagination. But I also do love the restrictions that are imposed on you by working within an established universe tightly. So if I was writing a present day Valiant book, for instance, or when I work for DC or Marvel, to have I'm sorry I've made Ninjak sad, by the way. Just read the yeah, to have the restrictions, there's actually I find it anyway, a really satisfying challenge to be given as it were, a small target in a complex continuity and being told to sort of fit a really good story into that. So I like both. I know that doesn't suit some writers, like one or the other very, very much. I happen to like both. But certainly Rai has been rewarding because of its freedoms. And it's been thankfully free from the kind of continuity clashes I've experienced doing other books in the last few years, where you're constantly trying to juggle what you're doing with books that may be featuring some or all of the same characters at the same time.
Do you feel like the fan bases are different, like from a Valiant comic or a Marvel or DC comic book?
Well, I don't know. It's yes, I sort of think I do. I feel like, having come back to Valiant to write Rai, because it's been a long time since I've written for Valiant. We're talking a long time. I'm not going to even. I wrote Ninjak and Shadow Man back in, I think, the late 1860s. So I was very struck by the fact that I was sort of interfacing writing this book with fans that, as it were, I'd not met before, because they were determinedly and rightly Valiant fans. And that was great to the audience. But in my career, I've worked for and still work for so many different companies. I write computer games, I write novels, I write comics I've written for just about everybody. And for the longest time, I would actually, even though my surname is quite unusual, I would meet people at conventions and they would be a particular fan of something I'd done, like my work on the Doctor Who comic, or my work on 2000 AD, or my work on Marvel, or Games Workshop, Warhammer, or whatever it was. And it would often come as a huge surprise to them that I was the same person who did the other things. They only knew me from one of the things that I did. And they said, isn't it funny? There's another guy called Dan Abnett who also writes for that other thing. And I go, no, that's also me. And they would be bewildered by that. So I don't know. In a small way, I feel like I know that the people who've been reading my work for quite a while sort of come with me when I say, oh, I'm going off to do this now. And they go, well, I don't usually read Marvel, or I don't usually read Valiant. I'll go and check that out because Dan's writing it, which I take as a huge compliment. But I love that idea that you can get a cross-pollination of fan bases, that they can still be very loyal fans of the thing they love the most, but they will actually try out things that other people are doing, and as it were, follow creators because they like what a creator's doing, a particular artist, a particular writer. Yeah, that's nice. But yes, I do feel I'm in the presence of a new readership, which is great. A readership that's new to me, anyway.
And Kenneth, kind of the same vein as Greg's question, but I'm going to flip it a little bit. If you could have Rye team up with any character from the big two, who would it be? So someone you haven't written, I'll say, from the big two that he could team up with.
Who would? Well, Rye is very, very, very fast indeed. It's something we've established. So it'd be interesting to put him up with one of the speedsters, like either, I don't know, Quicksilver or the Flash. But I think Rye would probably work particularly interestingly with some or all of the X-Men, to be honest. I think he's the sort of person that if he turned up in Marvel continuity, the X-Men would just take him in because he would kind of suit their way of looking at things. So I see that working really, really well. But it would be great to see him alongside I don't know, Cyborg, or even, I don't know, Green Arrow. That would be an interesting combination.
I feel like Ryan and Cable would have a lot in common.
Oh yes,
being from the future.
Yeah. I think they'd sit down and have very long conversations about how ridiculously easy it is to travel in time in the Marvel universe. And Ryan would just be flabbergasted. You mean you keep popping back there? How many times have you been here? You know, because I think that, you know, yes, they would have a lot of. Cable's a very good example. I think he'd get on very well with them, and probably Psylocke as well, probably. Yeah.
Those are all good picks. Going back to the sci-fi post-apocalyptic stories, what attracts you to that genre? You know, we kind of discussed that you've explored this a lot, and not just here in Valiant, but other companies as well. So why do you like this genre so much?
I don't know. I've always liked SF. I've always liked speculative fiction. I think you get to world build, which I like doing, but you also get to explore ideas that might be harder to do as it were in a straight way. So for instance, in the way that everything, Star Trek itself, the original series Star Trek back in the 60s, would often deal with very big political ideas, but because it was set in the future and it was done metaphorically through the context of meeting aliens, they were able to say all sorts of and explore all sorts of things that would have been difficult to do in a contemporary show. So I think there is that. There's stuff about I don't know, the human condition and the way societies work or don't work, and the way persecutions work, or the way diversities work, and all sorts of other things like that you can explore more fully in a science fiction setting, because I suppose essentially it's like a laboratory in which you can experiment and show ideas without risking essentially offending anybody by trying to draw them into your story. And I think that's one of the great things about it. I mean, we seem to be living in an age now, and have done for the last 15, 20 years, we're living in an age now where almost all of science fiction seems to be coming true. So everything in science fiction and The Simpsons seem to be coming true as we go forward. And I think that's interesting. I think there is sometimes it feels to me, God, this is going to sound very pessimistic, and I don't mean it literally, but sometimes it feels to me that we're slightly running out of future these days. That is to say, we're beginning to use up or erase all the ideas about what the future was going to be, that certainly I've grown up with, and people have been, the sort of ideas we cherished for 10, 20, 30 years about what the future was going to be like and where we were heading. And we seem to be using up. We're either getting there, okay, that's done, checked off the list. I think there's a great need for science fiction writers, science fiction creators, generally speaking, to start imagining more and new and different futures. I think there is a lack of future, because once there's a future, there are all sorts of things we can hope for and wish for, or even seek to avoid. And I think that's always been one of the great roles of speculative fiction and science fiction. And I feel that we need it sort of now more than ever. And I don't mean because the world's about to end or anything desperately bad like that, but we have facing some very challenging political situations, no matter which side of things you're on. Sort of and we're facing a pandemic that has changed the way societies worldwide has worked. We need to think about future. We need hope. We need positivity. We need ideas about how society can move forward and that kind of thing. And that's what science fiction's always done.
Yeah, for sure. And I hope we do get to see those future stories now that we're living in a really hard time. I hope that we're seeing writers kind of write those stories during this time. But yeah, we're going to start winding down. So is there anything else you'd like to plug? Anything else you'd like to talk about with Rye?
Really, to reiterate the idea that that August is a great place to start reading Rye if you haven't read it already. And I it's one of those things where I'm almost convinced that if you pick it up, you'll go, why wasn't I reading this before? And to remind existing readers that's when we get back on the tracks as well. And I think also to mention, because I feel it's necessary after the last point we made about talking about the idea of science fiction providing us with big ideas about the future. I think one of the other things that science fiction and Rye and Valiant comics and comics in general can do for us right now in what is for a lot of people a very difficult situation is offer an escape. It doesn't have to be highbrow or deeply intellectual. It can just be adventurous and mind expanding and imaginative. So literally the opportunity. I think I'm a big reader, but I think I've read more in the last few months than ever before. I've watched a lot of television. I've read a lot of comics. It is a marvelous way of freeing yourself from what might be literally an enclosed situation where you're forced to stay put. Reading is there was a poll in one of the British newspapers recently where they got the public to vote for the jobs that they thought were most useful during the pandemic lockdown and the ones that they thought that were most useless. So at the top of the useful ones were obviously things like health workers and sort of the obvious people who are clearly at the front line of delivering stuff. But everybody was struck by the fact that at the top of the list of the least useful people around at the moment was artists.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, artists absolutely useless. What good are they at the moment? And I was thinking, wait a minute, the entire population of, let's face it, the world has sat at home and they've entertained themselves by watching TV and listening to music and playing games and reading comics and books and stuff like that. And I'm thinking, where do you think all of those things came from? It isn't. I'm not saying for a moment it is as vital as being a nurse or a doctor or a paramedic or whatever else like that who is doing absolutely essential things right now, or somebody working in essential services in a shop or delivering food or any of those things. I'm not putting it on a par with that, but I'm saying the kind of mental well-being that the escape of art, both art with a capital A in a big high concepty way, or simple, popular, fun, escapist art like comics is, I think, shouldn't be undervalued. I don't know where we'd be. I don't know. I think we'd have all gone slightly madder than we already are if we hadn't had those things to look at. So
sure, and much quicker, for sure. That first week.
So what I'm saying is, please read Rye in August when it comes back. You're not going to find some treatise of how humanity should proceed post-pandemic in there, or some big science fiction ideas. It's not that kind of book, but it is a great piece of escape. I hope it's a really, really good piece of entertainment, and it will be provocative and hopefully carry you along with it and carry you out of wherever you happen to be sitting at the moment.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Yeah, go pick up the book, guys. Again, August. Go support your local comic book store, especially during this time, and go support Valiant Comics and Dan as well. So hope you guys all enjoyed. Thank you, Dan, for coming on. This was a lot of fun.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Spending your time.
Everybody.
Of course. All right. Bye, guys. See ya.